One way.
You have bandwidth and everything?
I had about 20. Project graduation.
Were you? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know something about it. Where you live now, you don't need to.
He gets traffic ticket. He was hurrying.
Yeah, they moved that, we were talking about.
Keep going, because he's never been to home, it was 5 or 6 feet.
Last year.
He raced the red light.
They almost gonna
So he was gonna lose us.
3 years.
They had a nice picture. He says, you think I should pay the fine? I said, I think you should decide that based on what you want to go back in Canada for that.
Their senior trip to
Thanks.
NXT.
You want to go to Canada again? Yeah, probably a big deal.
We have to consider.
Yep.
Seriously, can I really park my car here?
What's that?
That is really one of
Nice. Yeah.
Next spaces, we could probably, I never even thought of that. He's the guy I like to coordinate. If we had people that wanted to leave a car on the side to go to the bridge work, we could probably work on them.
Where's the side?
Days, what?
Oh, in this, back here?
Yeah,
So she's down for both.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll,
That's a good
yeah,
idea. That'd be
let us
great.
figure it out a little bit more formally than a quick conversation here, but yeah,
Okay.
we'll follow up with you.
All right, great.
All right. Let's get rolling. Thank you everybody for joining. Quick attendance. I haven't heard from Rob yet. But we have Lori Stadelko. Gracie's online. Gracie, are you with us?
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning. Gracie, how do you pronounce your last name?
Gable.
Gable.
So it's pronounced
Thank-
like it's an A, but it's spelled with an E.
Okay. A little bit of a curveball, but we'll adjust. Thank you. So we have Cliff DeShane, our town managers here. We have Diane Breen. We have Chad Eddy, Leo Kenny, Matt Atchison is here. We have
Matt Atchison is here.
Matt Atchison is here, Dennis Cross, Dan Merrill, police chiefs, we have Brian McGill and Cynthia Martinez Edgar, is that right? And Mitch Stone, Nathan Merritt, so still waiting for a couple people who may join us, but let's kind of get into it. I thought we had a really good discussion, kind of broad ranging, kind of explorative discussions last week. Hopefully, like to be a little more focused in our conversations this week in terms of leading towards some action items that we can pursue as a committee. And again, as a reminder that we have an expectation or an ask from council that we have stuff reported out for our no later than July 15th. We've got these meetings scheduled through whatever that Monday is before that, or July 13th or 14th. So we want to try and sequence our work so that we get something to report out at that point. So in terms of today's agenda, we wanted to throw it out and have some potential topic areas for us to discuss. Then we're going to go into a discussion, a timeline once we kind of covered some of these topic areas, and under the topic areas, I would add other. So if there are other things that people want to put higher on our list, and then homework for members of the committee and staff to kind of come back with as we go. And thinking ahead to the timeline item, I mean, I think it'd be helpful to have some things that we think we could get some quick wins on based on, authority we already have, focuses that we can turn our attention to within our existing authority as a community, or the existing resources that we have within a community. And then that would be ready by the end of this process, and then some potentially longer term things. So item A was education, and we talked a lot last week, and a lot of the work we've done is just setting a baseline. Well, first of all, does anybody have any others before we jump into conversation?
I mean, fines are identified as a quick win. I don't know if that necessarily has to be today, but that's one topic, I think.
Did that fall into ordinance change?
You're good. I mean, there's big ordinance change, right? There's changed the 100 to a 300 or a 500. That's a small ordinance change. I'd probably separate them out just from a timeline point of view.
Alright, so fines, it's a quick one. Any other topics or subtopics that we want to add? Okay, let's talk about education. So we had a couple of sides. I think education broadly is, I think one of the challenges that we have is that people don't know what the expectations are in Orono. And people don't know how to engage with our process in a way that is as either a renter, a property owner, or a neighbor in terms of where they go to get help. So we have people doing different things, take matters into their own hands, not getting people into the kind of the disruptive property process. So what do we want to accomplish ultimately on the education front? I throw it out for discussion. I do it.
Have we ever thought about, I don't know how this would work or even work, is having some kind of open forum when the students start moving in? Where we have maybe a meeting here with the police department where they can kind of explain to the parents and the students of the consequences, and I don't know, I'm just trying to throw something out there, if that would work. I don't know what you'd get for attendance either, because the kids come in, that might be the hard part.
That's what you get. Yeah, and they come at different times of the
Right.
year, month, and year or two.
Is there a way to talk to the property owners that maybe they could put some kind of language in their rental agreements? You know, and talk about some of maybe the new types of fines, you know, really make sure that they go through those things and then talk about, because I know you probably obviously can't tell a renter what they need to put in there. But like, for instance, Matt put something in there like, okay, here's what will happen, and then here's how much I'm gonna fine you. Because I have, you know, I'll have this fee against me, or I'll have to go in and go to court or whatever.
That looked like, and that's I think a great point. And that point number 2 is kind of, that's what I was thinking that was referring to, hopefully. And I think that's totally doable. Like maybe there's landlords that wouldn't want to take that, but for me, that seems like a good, like, one sheet of itemizing, and even with an initial, like, I mean, I think most would happily do it. At least I'd happily do it, to have the specifics in one sheet, sign up, you know, initial that, and they sign the lease. I think that's there's lots we could put there. And it's the other education piece, I think you sort of alluded to, is that you mentioned to Dan after I can't remember what, some product used, one call does it all. You remember that? It's probably a trademark thing, but
It's not that good.
well, but something did use it. But I think the education part is on residents too, that
Yeah.
911. It's midnight, you know, anytime really, but I mean, it's midnight.
Well, I think we learned about
Voluntary.
So I mean, I think educating everyone on it, and there was a lot of talk, and I think Diane, you pointed out some things about, yeah, I never quite really wanted to know. And I think we heard pretty clearly from the chief that that's why we're there. So I think enforcing that, not enforcing it, but getting it out that it's okay, do that.
Well, I think that's a good point, because I didn't know if you ride by and you hear a noise ordinance. My wife always thought you guys would stop, hey, you know, turn the music down. But as you said, you guys can't. So that was great to know that, wow, we have to make the initial calls. So I wonder how many other people don't know that.
Although based on the listserv we have in Webster side, I don't think anybody in Webster side realizes that's true. So, I mean, I would envision just a good neighbor document. And I mean, you say here, it's both the renters and the residents, right? It's education about how the process works. Right, renters should know that 911 could be called, and that doesn't necessarily mean, they're committing a crime, but that's the channel to use, and neighbors should know this, and people who are gonna have a party should know this, and once you have that good neighbor document, you can put it on the town webpage, you can post it at Orono Days Fair, right? You could door knocker it. I'd be perfectly happy to walk around and door knocker it in Webster every September. Right? And yeah, and landlords could use that as a contract too.
I think it's important to educate the residents, the neighborhood, the people that live here in this town, because a lot of people are old school, and don't know or haven't been up to the times and the policies and laws, and I think we need to educate our locals as well.
Yeah, like you're saying, it could be one information sheet that goes in everybody's mailbox, and also could be possibly something that a renter could use if they wanted to, or something similar that they could initial.
Or like the Orono observer that we get.
Yeah.
Gracie, was that,
So- Yeah, so this past semester, I started work on a document that sounds kind of similar to this. We were thinking it would be a Bill of Rights and Responsibilities for renters in Orono that would be given to them when they move in. So it would list things like the noise ordinances, what the process is for that, all of the responsibilities that you take on when you become a renter in Orono, but in addition to like what rights they have in terms of if a tenant feels their rights are being violated. So it was kind of a double purpose document. So this I think aligns already with some work that I have been drafting. And I think it's been shared with Dan, like the initial work that we have, but I would love to share it with the rest of the committee as well.
yeah, Gracie, I think that'd be great. I don't know that I have access to like forward it on to people. If you want to send a reply all to, I think there's probably an email list you could reply all to, is kind of is to share the document. And yeah. So it's gonna start an email distribution.
Yeah.
And I like the idea.
Reply all to the like initial email that you sent before the last meeting.
Yeah, that'd be fine. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, because all of these things are things that students and student renters are also very frustrated about. And so I think that their education was also the angle that we were looking at taking. And I think it's a really important thing because so many people just straight up don't know what resources are available to them on either side.
Gracie, what are the renters frustrated about?
One of the things that we were seeing was like some renters didn't feel like their living conditions were suitable. So whether it was apartments that didn't have a closet or didn't have a window, or it's 4 to 5 people to one, or bedrooms to one bathroom, or unsuitable parking conditions, just a variety of things that kind of seem to be the fault of a lot of people being put into spaces that weren't necessarily meant for that many people.
So those are in the ordinances that Brian sent. So if that could be simplified, and that could be something that they could.
I wonder if there aren't two documents, right? A good renting relationship document and a good neighbor document.
Mhm.
I think there's two slightly, I mean, they clearly overlap in places like the noise ordinance and some of those kinds of things, but.
So it looks like, it's like here, we're thinking about you too. It's not just, all the things you do wrong. It's like here are the things, your rights too, like Bill of Rights. In case Gracie's saying.
I think there's a rights, resources and responsibilities element to it, kind of all three of those. And I think it's an initiative that are really well aligned in terms of, communication and outreach. So I think that would make a lot of sense. And I think we've got a lot of channels between the help from the university, the Orono Festival Days work we're gonna do. I think I would like very much to see signage like there. I don't know if you've seen them yet, but there's some signage up with QR codes along the river, along some of the waterways in Orono, where you can click on it and see where the water's going. It's kind of a water conservation initiative. And I'd like to see something similar in the gateways into our residential neighborhoods, where people it's clear that you're entering a residential neighborhood and this is a good neighbor. And I'll link something on the website for people. Yeah, Matt.
Going back to enforcement,
Yep.
on my way here, I used that crosswalk over there.
Yeah.
I almost got run over in the crosswalk, even though it's clearly marked.
Well, I'll second.
Very
crosswalk
well,
enforcement.
very well marked. It's got the orange pillars and.
Yeah.
You know, as the person almost ran me over, I'm pointing to the crosswalk stuff and they're like, oh, you know, flipping me off. Like just some people just. Signs don't
Yeah.
hit everybody.
No, they don't.
People just wanna.
Yeah.
Run the pedestrian over and the poor lady across the street who works at the law office got killed. By a kid who ran her over because they were texting
Yeah,
while driving, so I just, sometimes signs are,
I get it. That's why.
people just tune them out, you know,
It's different ways to see,
yeah.
so we hit it in every
So
direction.
some of it, you know, hard
Different
to,
rules.
it's hard to,
You gotta have 6 different ways.
right, it's just hard to regulate human behavior, right, is my point. Some people are gonna see the rules and abide by them, and other people are gonna go, bah. That's a
But it's
rule
the-
for him, that's not a rule for me,
It's-
right, you know.
It's the people that will stop. I mean, maybe there are some
Most people will
people,
stop.
but there, and I think that 6 way, like with the QR code, I was thinking like with the documents that you got, the neighborly and the Bill of Rights or whatever it might be called, but like that QR code could directly go to those. Plus you could put them in like the court news in the mailboxes, plus they could be at the Orono days, and we could be handing them out there with people there for more information, and we could also have it in the renters agreement if they choose to. You know, so we're almost there. I don't know, that was like 4.
Yeah, refrigerator magnets always work well.
There you go.
I do.
Yeah, you're like, when we talk.
Out of the cake and sing,
I know we-
sing.
I've got, so I'll give you another example. This is just real world, 10 years of landlording here, real world stuff. We've got refrigerator magnets and we have signs posted by the inside doors of every apartment. If you have a property emergency, this is how you contact us. 99% of them don't contact us that way. Why? I don't know, because these are all highly intelligent people. They just don't. It's weird, but it's the real world. They just don't.
Yeah, but I totally agree with what you're saying, because I do think like it's something that you see every day and you could just totally, you know.
You just ignore it.
don't-
Yeah, you should-
Yeah, but maybe for that person, it's that sit down when you talk to them and you go, now listen, you need to listen here.
Yep.
Look at this,
That
okay?
works. That's
And
what-
then we're gonna sign this. It's your signature, big adulting thing. And maybe some people that won't work for, but,
That's the only thing I've found that works, is spending 45 minutes of time.
which is a lot of time. for
It
you
is a lot
guys,
of time.
And a lot of people won't do
And
that.
at my size, I can just be, I mean, you know, I just got off a couple 100-hour weeks in a row. Hard to fit stuff in.
Mhm.
If I was his size, he's 3 or 4 times my size.
Mhm.
I don't know how he could do that.
Right,
And he's not even one of the biggest. There's plenty of
Right.
landlords bigger, you know.
and it's
So-
hard to say, cause even if you put it online, you know, everybody's used to the agreements, those scroll down, initial it, so.
If I don't go over the lease with them, they don't read it.
All right, Chad.
What about putting, I know we have street signs, maybe entering a good neighbor, et cetera, neighborhood zone or something like that, just so you're getting out there. But what about our businesses promoting the good neighbor? Like, hey, you know, putting a sign out, good neighbor, just you're visualizing. The more you see it, the more you're gonna remember it. I'm just trying to think outside the box. You have businesses that you go into all the time, students visit Pat's Pizza, maybe just put something there, but if the business will allow it, you know, just maybe a good neighbor or a QR code to scan to get that.
Jody?
Well, just also, I think the layering of messaging is important. That's going to be critical no matter what. And the sit down, and then the enforcement piece becomes very important. And then for landlords who have lots of units that are having a profitable business for this, having the staffing to do that time becomes a cost of business operation that needs to be built in. Because if there is the messaging and there is the community will and there is the enforcement, and the other piece also needs to be the education. And if sitting down with your tenants works, then that should be part of what it is. And, you know, I run a business. I know when I have expenses coming at me, I create a line item for that and I build it into my operations. And I think with advanced, you know, knowing that this is how we're going to be moving, if this is, then there's time to put that piece into place.
When we talk about the Orono stops and like the initiative the ultimate goal of the initiative is create a culture of roadway sharing and safety. And in a perfect world, you have the 25 mile, you have the stop for pedestrian sign. And we talk about it in terms of education, infrastructure, and enforcement. So in a perfect world, you have a stop for pedestrian, sign, or the other crosswalk signage. You build out, pedestrian refuge spaces. You can build out the curbway, in a lot of, you see them. Where it forces traffic to slow down and be mindful that this is a crosswalk, and maybe a refuge in the middle of the lane, so people can get halfway across. And then you have Officer Merrill, at the other side of the intersection in a car waiting to pull over somebody who doesn't stop. Those are kind of the three elements that fit together. And, of course, we're resource constrained, and it's gonna take time to get everything done that we want to do on the Orono stops front, but good neighbor front, I think it's not dissimilar in that we have, clear expectations that we can communicate. We have several channels that we communicate that with, and then we have, I think it's instead of building infrastructure, we build relationships with the landlords that help in the university to help send the message, and then we have enforcement on the back end of that too. So I think those are kind of all the three things that kind of come together.
I just wanted to add, is there something that the students or residents have to come into town, like into the town office for, like when you register your car?
Yeah.
When you come in to vote, like that's a good
Most of
place
them
to.
don't register their car then.
Is,
Here.
They wouldn't
Yeah,
register
it's-
their car here. They would register them at home. And if they register to vote, then they usually do that on campus too.
okay.
Because we have huge voter registration drives. It's hard for commuters are a tough audience to try and wrangle. This is probably an unpopular thing to say for Clinton and Mitch, so don't listen. But they do respond to incentives. So what do we do with the fine money? That when other people are fined, do we create incentives for the students to, be good renters or some sort of, I don't know, something? Pizza party with your neighborhood from the fines of the other naughties? I don't know.
Incentive for the landlords that don't have the, right, huh?
Whatever, I don't know, incentives, carrot stick,
Fines for these kinds of things stay in the community, or are they like traffic tickets that go back to the state?
Well, the police department's so profitable, so. Sorry, sarcasm, it's Monday, I couldn't resist that. It goes in the general fund, it offsets the cost to run the programs we do, but we could set up, Orono stops, different things like that, you could set up, that was one of the ones that, pizza party's an easy one to do, it's something that you could actually set up in a couple locations. You could even talk to maybe the businesses to say, hey, if the town funded it, would you give, could we mail every apartment unit in town a $5 off your pizza and knowing we'll reimburse it kind of thing.
Or like the Darling's ice cream truck. And have like an ice cream truck in the neighborhood kind of thing, I don't know, on a nice day.
Yeah.
Meet your neighbors.
Dairy Queen, it's like Dairy Queen.
The Orono Festival Days is kind of love to get some neighborhood events as part of that. That's a capacity, that'll be a capacity issue we discussed. So good ideas and conversation about the education. I don't know, Rob, if you have anything else you'd want to add on that piece, but I think the question is that, what do we kind of get a sense of what our educational goals will be, but then, or tactics, but then what is it that so much work is gonna be, what are we gonna educate? Because it's just not clear now what
Would it be bad to have hate to say subcommittee, but it's a working group. Brian's done quite a bit of work on his end. Sounds like Gracie done quite a bit of work. And between Dan and I, or Mitch and I, or Mitch and Dan, whichever, kind of put that all together for something to bring back to the group, is that 1 to 2 pager. I think that's the way we could kind of approach that piece. I don't know.
like a communication, 1 or 2 pager, but then also like a communication plan as part of it, like what the different channels are and levers are we could pull to
We
communicate.
definitely pull Cody into this. He does communicate. He will help a lot too.
I
Yeah.
think orientation is too,
Communication-
yeah.
Communication plan could be separate, or this group or a different set, but just the writing,
Yeah.
I do think works better with 3 or 4 people than 15 people.
I can pull some of the things that our commuter program does now too. Because if we're gonna do a unified message, then we could, take some of the stuff that they've been putting together and see if we can merge it all together. It could even be like a one page that's two-sided, one side for the neighbors and one side for the students or for the renters.
Rights and resources in town.
I do like Brian's idea of having the general message and then having a one pager to initial and to offer up to landlords to use is a good idea. Similar, but separate.
So just from a timing standpoint. Normally try to get out rental registration information. And landlords have basically the month of July and August to return that, so we usually get that out at the end of this month. We do have a one pager that goes with it, that has some of the stuff, not all the stuff that goes to landlords, but. I know it's a tight timeline, but. It certainly would be the right time to be sending it to people, so.
So it's, can you repeat the timeline again? You got,
So information goes out, the end of this month. For people to register their rentals. They have until basically September 1st.
The only thing I'd say is leases are signed.
I got it, but I mean,
So I'm just to maybe not get too worried about that timeline, because obviously anything we do here, we can't get into a current lease, so there's that. But in the notice to landlords is of what we're trying to do is, I think it's more to the renters and whether we, you get a landlord, you get a piece in that folder, getting it out to your tenants is probably not likely either. So just saying, maybe that's not a huge like target or a super important target for us to feel.
but
like
if you
we
are
have
trying to
really
target
through
this,
hoops.
the landlords probably ought to know what you're trying to target for the renters too, so.
Yeah, maybe
I mean, whether
some
they're-
kind of notice.
Yeah, because they're gonna-
What are you doing there, actually? Yeah, that's a good point. Just to make sure everyone knows.
a little bit of it is you're trying to, rebuilding the engine while you're driving the car a little bit in terms of the timing. So the challenge for the communication piece will be, what do we communicate now when the work's not done? And then the community and the council haven't had a chance to react to whatever we're gonna propose. So that'll be, but
I mean, when you were talking about that, you had this nice formula of education, infrastructure and enforcement, right? And for traffic, that's really easy. Everybody in this
it's
room.
super easy, Matt, right, this morning? Yeah.
Well, yeah, everybody in this room would agree what the traffic rules are. You stop for buses, you stop for crosswalks, you stop for lights, you don't speed, right? I don't know that even in this room, we have a complete agreement about what good neighbor looks like. Does it have parties that stop at 10? Does it have parties that don't serve large amounts of alcohol? I mean, I'm not sure that there is an agreement at the moment in this room about what the expectation of a good neighbor is. It's not
That's what-
the same as traffic.
I think getting it on paper will be nice, so we can all take a look at it, even if
that's-
it's emailed out or whatever, and really think about what those
That's
points
one
are.
way, is to just start with a draft as a discussion starting point, but assuming it's gonna change as the discussion moves.
So do you think that's part of the communication document that kind of puts it in front of us all in like stark black and white, or in terms of what the,
I mean, that's one way. The other way is to have a conversation first and then try and write it down.
Well,
I don't have a strong opinion, but I'm just pointing out that I don't think there's a strong consensus about exactly what the expectation in a neighborhood is these days.
Good point.
so how about for the 16th raw data? We can get you some stuff by the 23rd. Kind of come in here with what's beginning to, how it's taking shape. That gives you, I mean, we're not setting it in stone. This isn't anything like that, but if those were the two dates, I think in 2 weeks. Yeah, there's a group, it's a team. That's the whole point.
so we just, but for the 16th, we define, we take a stab at defining what a good neighbor is.
16th will bring you in some of the information that we all have just talked about. You have it in front of you and then you could talk about it. Yep. For the 23rd, maybe we could come up with that first draft. If you will.
I think you got two pieces here of communication. You got two groups, right? You have a small group of landlords in Orono, probably, I don't know, a couple hundred, but you guys tell me, I have no idea. Yes, maybe, but it's a small number of people. I think you'll find a vast majority of those people are very sympathetic to what you're trying to do. Because landlords don't want parties, because parties destroy properties and parties are just, there's nothing good for the landlord. It hurts reputation, it hurts neighborhoods, it hurts property, cause damage, right? So landlords are gonna be, yeah, yes, let's help. We want to help you. I think most of them. And then you have the public at large, right? The people who live in neighborhoods. Landlords, couple hundred tops. I'd be surprised if there's even that many in Orono. And then you got what, 11, 12, 13,000 people, assuming the census is right, which probably isn't because it's very hard to do the census because they do it at the time of year when all the kids go back home. So probably there's more people in Orono than we think there are. The landlord that you mentioned is to be a timing thing, right? Our opportunity to get a tenant's attention to really get it is at showings and leases. That's when we have their full attention. The rest of the time, like everyone else, we struggle to capture their attention, right? Unless it's with a fine or something. And so there's a timing thing, right? If you guys develop paperwork that's, hey, landlords, we'd like you to add this one sheet of paper similar to what the state of Maine does with like lead and radon. They have a one pager that they want signed or whatever. The town of Orono could develop something similar if they wanted to. Hey, this is our expectations, right? We'd love it because right now we're the bad guys. So if you want to share responsibility to be the bad guys, we'd love that, you know, so sheet of paper. But again, whatever you develop now, it's not really gonna get into the hands of these people for 6 months, 12 months, right? On the other hand, I heard a ton of horror stories last week that really got my attention, you know, from you and you and you. Where these are people who are trying to break up parties. And they really shouldn't have to do that, right? And it was upsetting for me to hear that you feel like you have to. Very glad that Chief was here because now you know you don't have to. But there may be a lot of people in Orono who think they have to do that, right? And it's just being a landlord for 10 years in Orono, I tell you, it's not fun to break up a party. It's not fun to do it at 2 a.m. A neighbor certainly shouldn't have to do it. I think you could make a huge impact to this problem. That's not a huge problem. You know, some neighborhoods it is, but most neighborhoods it's not. Make a huge impact if everybody in those neighborhoods understood. Just call PD and let them handle it. You don't have to do anything. You're not being a bad neighbor. Your neighbor is being a bad neighbor, not you. You're just calling PD, let them handle it. If there's something that's not police related, but it's, you know, these kids are leaving trash all over the lawn or whatever, you know, civil thing, then just call code, right? Those two things, I think, could help clean this up a ton.
Yeah, I agree. And I like the idea of the handout. I know it's gonna take a while to get it into circulation. I also like the idea of making it clear that this is one of those neighborhoods where maybe you don't want to rent if you're looking to come here and have, you know, this is where there's gonna be a lot of where there's a clear expectation of what good behavior looks like, and there's gonna be a lot of effort around enforcing that expectation. And ultimately, you get to the point, hopefully you get to the point where maybe this is not realistic, but ideally the word starts to spread that, you know, if we want to have a party experience, we maybe don't want to live in this part of the town, or maybe there are other places we should be going.
That's what I've always hoped.
Yeah.
You know, just by the community, you know.
But there's also that piece where they don't know how to have parties. There's the harm reduction approach, you know, the risk management and harm reduction is like, well, you can have social events, but they don't know what their expectations are. So they just go full on rager, you know? So if you know things like some of the stuff we talked about last week was, you know, like, who's coming into your house and knowing who's there and having somebody at the doors and sober monitors and watching the noise and things like that, watching the numbers, things like
That
that.
could be like part of, you know, not necessarily on the big sheet, but like, you know, like link here to, you know.
Responsible hosting
Yeah,
or something
exactly.
like that.
That-
And if you
yeah.
keep the no offense, the law out of it and just say, this is what we would like you to do based on what is reasonable for
Right.
humans.
For those people who will actually read and
Right,
things, you know,
right.
and then for those who
That's how
don't.
that a whole party registration came up for the fraternities, is that we started to get into the harm reduction approach. Do this in a way that's not gonna hurt anyone.
Who's liable, and I'm not sure if we can answer this, for say, I know when you leave a bar and you're drunk and you kill somebody, usually it's the bartender or the restaurant. Is the resident that's having that party, or is it the landlord who becomes responsible? That's a big responsibility to have if you're having a party. Do these kids know that? I mean, I don't know.
Reason number 7, why not to be a landlord?
mean, they know, we do a lot of education, at least on campus and through commuter programs about the Class D misdemeanor of hosting or furnishing a place or furnishing alcohol. So we do, share that information and things like that. When that student died in Old Town many years ago at Dillon, everyone was sued in that, university, the landlords, the other people in the house, but and the outcome of that was, everybody chipped in a little, but it wasn't a big thing. So, but everybody gets sued.
And we did the same thing. I know, and this is what I try and communicate to the students too. When the young girl died up in the snowbank on Colburn Drive, we charged every single party that she was out with furnishing, and they all got convicted of crimes for that. So.
All that
That's-
information that we don't know, like, and that's why I think, again, like having those papers, those general sheets, where it's not just the students and the renters that will know, but like all of us, all of the neighbors, everybody in the community knows about this. Like even, like I hate to think 911, I still wish there was another number, but like if I got a piece of paper in my mailbox that said, you just simply have to call 411 or whatever it might be. And there's like a phone tree maybe that will have, that we could talk about later, but that it's that simple. And then I, as a renter, know, oh, like my neighbor across the street could just easily call this number. And, they know it and they know that I know it because I got the same piece of paper. I think that could go a long way. And then having information about what you're just saying, that all these people, you don't start with this as a crime, but you read on, you can see that it gets serious.
Well, we do have the two numbers and we don't need to rebuild the infrastructure.
Yeah.
A non-emergent call should be calling the town office on regular
4,000.
business hours. Period. 848-4000. If you need somebody right now, your choice, there is no alternative. Like, government's been built around 911. And you may feel uncomfortable. Called it this weekend. It is awkward to call 911.
That's not what I call.
But you call 911. That's what you're supposed to call.
But I don't call that number.
You don't call
But
911?
No, but it might
Policeman
go
to the dispatcher.
Oh, you did, but again,
Yeah.
that's where I feel we break this
Yeah,
line.
I call 866-4000 and I
Yep.
do get the dispatcher.
Oh, yeah, 866-4000.
I don't
So-
watch
I
any.
think you're still in her.
Yeah, and that's.
Did I say 40? I'm not saying
Yeah.
40.
Okay, you're nothing
Part of the education campaign too, is that we're socialized to think about the police as emergency only. Orono's a community policing area, if we're looking for neighborhood policing, then that's community policing means that you can call for help, not just emergency.
So are you saying that like maybe I need to be re-educated and I should call 911, but there's still so much stigma with that. Like if you put on the paper 866-4000, I'm much more likely to be like, oh, that's pleasant. I can call them at 1 a.m.
But this is where, I know, because it started over here and I'm gonna jump in. This is where the town does have a challenge here. And it's gotta be recognized. It's different than universities and it's different than everybody else here. It's different than the landlords. We represent everyone. The realistic complaints, the over demanding complaints, the completely unrealistic complaints. We have to deal with them all. Our rules have to meet that. Our phone systems have to meet that. So I love that a lot of you are being very reasonable here, but there will be a situation where a neighbor has a slightly less than average tenant next door that maybe likes to listen to loud music at 10:30 at night, but they have a shift work and they can't have that. And so we have to deal with that and our rules have to adapt to this. So as we're coming through these, that's where some of the ones, and I think we're on the right tracks. I don't want to be to put a wet blanket over this and say, oh, we're not going down the right roads. We are. But I think you just got to understand that even this group, there's a lot of work after you're done here in the next couple of weeks to make sure you share with your neighbors and say, hey, sometimes there's certain situations we can't fix it. That unreasonable party, if they are going to break the rules, we can't stop them. They want to break the rules, they're going to break the rules, and we're gonna have to enforce that they broke the rules. Is that me? No. And we'll enforce that they broke the rules, knowing that's what's gonna happen. And that's where I think, to some degree, these fines are gonna be better publicized. We've gotta come up with, who said it? what defines, we don't even know what a good neighbor means here. We don't even know what a bad neighbor is. We don't even know how to hit the levels of it. I mean, a party for noise or being a nuisance property, however you want to word it, you know, it's almost like there's gotta be a level and this, you know, like we bust you up because you're a nuisance property and you're under 20, this is fine level A. If you're over 20 people, this is fine level B. And if you're exceeding 50 people, this is fine level C. Those kind of have to be there, except for we all know that a 2-bedroom, second-story apartment on Crosby is probably it's a violation 3, but it's only gonna have 20, it could have 16 kids in it. Or the neighbor could be so bad, it's because there's only 5 or 6 of them partying, but they're completely going crazy. But still a 1, and I think that's because the number of people that are at these parties is a problem. We do have to set that criteria, but that's what we gotta get into and just understand sometimes it's just not gonna fit. It's a $300 fine because there was only 5 of them and they were extremely unruly, but there was only 5 of them.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
never gonna write the perfect ordinance for
Correct,
every
yeah.
situation, but you do. So my neighbor had a daughter who graduated. They had a graduation party yesterday. It only went till 8 o'clock, so the street was empty by 8 o'clock at night, right? It's zero problem, right? So you gotta write the ordinance so that still happens, but it's the number of people, it's the noise, it's probably the underage drinking, it's the cars parked on the street, it's right, it's a bunch of things, I think, that add up and make. And we can all agree that the hockey house, and I understand these have to be concrete enough to be enforceable in a minute, but I don't think anybody in this room thinks that what happened at the hockey house a month ago was okay, right? So
Yeah.
you've got to draw some lines somewhere in there.
It's interesting because I know one of the things, like my Monday morning habit is to go back through and see what happened over the weekend, and I had a noise complaint in Webster site yesterday. You know what time it was at? 1 o'clock in the afternoon because people were in the park having a good time and a neighbor was disturbed by the music. That's a realistic thing that happened to us. And what do we do? What do you want us to do? The park is packed with people, which is what we want, but it's disturbing somebody and it's 82 degrees outside. Those are the ones that kind of put me in a little bit of a bind. I read those reports and I'm like, what are we gonna do here?
What did you do?
Yeah.
We went over and again, sometimes I think our presence just through the neighborhood changes things. We drove through, noticed that it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon and people were just down in the area, and then we called the complaint back and we're like, is it still happening? And they said, well, not as bad.
So they were heard, you responded, I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's best we can do.
But it's a noise still like, it's a noise complaint in the Webster side.
That's what I think
You
a
know?
good neighbor document has to be the same for everybody, right? The students students need to know that the boundaries are 10 o'clock at night, right? This decibel level or this, equivalent of a decibel level, and the neighbors need to know what it is too. Right?
You know, I'm sorry, I didn't make the meeting list, but I did watch the video.
Yeah, thank you.
And I saw that this hockey house, which just got referenced to, keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Are we spending a lot of time for a very limited problem?
No.
Are there other buildings over there that are a problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a common denominator?
Yeah, because the first thing we talked about was a hand going across, knocking on a
But is
door.
there a common denominator in ownership?
Oh, I don't know if it's the same property owner at 98 North.
And a lot of things that I try to solve, I look for common denominators. That's what I would look for in this case is, okay, is there a common problem?
It's
Based on-
alcohol.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna change that.
Yeah.
It's multiple property owners. It moves around from year to year, but it's
It
always.
didn't work
multiple
then, so it didn't work in that.
places.
It does shift from year to year. There's definitely.
Well,
in the-
keep
in
in
the
mind
30
that-
I still would have,
There's
like, you
students-
mentioned the
yeah.
hockey house, and then I heard somebody say they renewed the lease to them. There's the problem. I rented a hockey place in the 90s when they won their championship. And I had 2 buildings that had probably half a hockey team in 2 buildings, and I had no problem because Sean Walsh ran a tight ship. When Sean Walsh stopped coaching the hockey team, I continued to rent a hockey place. And I began to have problems. That was when White House was here. I made an appointment to go up and talk to White House. I said, I'm having a problem with your hockey place. And he says, what's that got to do with me? And I said, it's got a lot to do with you. You're the coach. This is your image. This is your image in the community. Everybody in the greater Bangor area knows. And I said, and if you don't control them off the ice, you'll never control them on the ice. Guess what? He's gone because he couldn't control them on the ice. And I stopped renting to hockey players. In fact, I even had one come in my office and I said, he wanted an apartment. I said, aren't you a hockey player? And he says, yes. I said, I'm sorry, I don't rent hockey players. Well, that's discrimination. I'll take you to court. I should take me because I don't think they're a minority group. Yeah, I mean, I don't need that. And that landlord have had a problem with hockey players. I don't know who the landlord is, but I'll say that. And then to renew with them, what's wrong with them?
Well, now they're gonna get paid, all those hockey
I mean,
players. They're gonna get paid more.
And I heard Matt explain last week how we don't want that. That's a pain.
Yeah.
Because chances are, when they do that, they're damaging the property. Many times, if they're reckless, they're hard to get all the rent out of. They're just irresponsible individuals.
Now, did you hear, what was the commitment we got from the property manager?
Yeah, so it's a new property management company too, but I mean, and that's back to the point, we're gonna have other new property management companies, so it is a real problem. And it is under the current same property management company.
I would
But but they made the commitment, they're in, they're ready, they're gonna evict if there's parties, they don't wanna be a bad property manager, and they don't wanna deal with the headaches of having problem houses in the community. What was the exact word? Yeah, don't
Why
want,
they re-signed.
don't want a bad reputation with the Orono Police Department.
I have annually, we have people that come in and want to renew their lease and say, no, well, sorry. I mean, either they didn't pay the rent on time, they caused mess, they were nuisances, we don't want you.
Yep.
Move on.
You gotta remember, Dennis and I are strict. All right, I'm showing an apartment, you show up 2 minutes late, I'm out. You know why? Cause it tells me you're not conscientious. If you're not conscientious about showing up on time, you're probably not gonna be conscientious about everything. It's a good point. It's an indicator, right? That kind of behavior means you're probably too much hassle.
I looked
got
inside their car too, see what's inside the car.
Right, I got 100 people, you know what?
If that's what they're-
You know what 100 tenants is? It's drama. That's what it is. You got probably 300 people. You know what that is? More drama, right? So yeah, we want drama-free tenants. We want tenants that are gonna be good
That's
neighbors.
the perfect
For
word,
sure.
never get grammar.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know,
Every year, listen, I only have 100. Every year I ask myself, do I wanna keep doing this? Every year I have a rolling midlife crisis. Do I wanna do it again? And every year I have one more year, I'll do one more. Yeah, I mean, it's, it's a lot of drama. So we're with you. We won't want the drama.
I know you guys mentioned the property manager. Why can't you go after the owner? I mean, why keep messing around with the property manager? They're gonna keep switching every year probably to get a different property manager in. Right, bypass him, go right to the owner. Did Dave Eccles own
I mean,
98 North Main Street?
I think that gets back to the ordinances, right? And who has responsibility for things.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah. Because, I mean, we had this conversation at the end last time, but 90% of the students are fantastic students. I have fantastic stories of student neighbors, right? 90% of the landlord probably, including everybody sitting at this table, is a really responsible landlord, but there's 10% that aren't. I happen to live next to a guy who lives in Massachusetts, and his property manager is in Hamden and he doesn't bother to show up for 3 or 4 hours. And, there, at the moment, it's pretty quiet, but for a while that was the lacrosse house, and there were loud parties and people coming out and swearing at 3-year-old kids and all kinds of stuff. And you call the guy up and he hangs up on you. So there has to be a way where the property owners are accountable too.
And you gotta keep the focus on too, like, Brian told me, I think when there were concerns last year, like in the fall, I think it was you, Brian, that told me, oh, and then around the middle of October, it gets too cold for people to be outside, it kind of quiets down for a while, and then so it's on us as community members and leaders, and our partners at the university, and our leadership team at the town to continue to focus on this, and have things in place that become part of how we do business in Orono. So it's not, and I think the frustration's gotta be, I would imagine, all right, what's it gonna be like this year? It's kind of like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Who's moving in? What are they gonna be like? I mean, I had people on either side of me buy houses, everybody in my neighborhood moved out after I moved in, essentially. Like year to year to year, and you're crossing your fingers, what are they gonna be like? And they're great and good for Dan and Jamie. But, in neighborhoods where you have a lot of transition, you never know. And it's not fair to ask people to go through that year in and year out and have to deputize themselves. I don't want you knocking on anybody's door at 12:30 at night, ever. Yeah.
Well, and remember that we can use the conduct code too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
Well, it's-
referral to the conduct code is if we're sure that they're students, and that's directory information, you can call student records to find out if they're students, and they can be referred to the conduct process, and that affects their educational record.
There's a place too where the neighbors have not always been
Mhm.
good neighbors.
Yeah.
I ran into a group of girls And there was a neighbor there where I'd had a property for a few years and they tended to complain and had problems. And sometimes they were, in fairness, they were legitimate complaints. So I told these girls, I said, if you're gonna party, play loud music, I said, this is not the place for you. I'll have a problem, you'll have a problem. And I said, so maybe, they said, oh, no, we'll take care of it. So after they got moved in, they baked a pan of brownies, went over and knocked on the guy's door, and they said, all we wanted to do was tell him if we forget that we're in a neighborhood and we get loud or like that, will you please, don't call Dennis, don't call the police department. Would you just call us? Guy slammed the door in his face.
Which isn't nice, but I've had a lot of people come to our door too and say, here's my number, just why don't you call me and don't call the cops? And I mean, and I do go over to their houses, but I always tell them, I don't want your number because I don't want to have to call you. First of all, there's a good chance you're not gonna pick up a phone if you're in the middle of a party. But you should know enough not to have a party that's that loud. So I never accept those numbers and I get them every single year and
Slamming the door in the girl's face.
not nice. No, I've never done that. That's not nice.
And I know they were, because they were good tenants and they were very safe,
Yeah.
but they make me a pan of brownies for a favor I did. I had to soak the pan for a couple of days, so I get the brownies. I mean, that wasn't that good.
Yeah.
But
No, and the hockey house a year ago that you probably got one too, they gave us bottles of wine. So, and I was,
Too far away. I can still hear them though.
yeah, they came over and I was like, I don't want your bottle of wine. Please don't give me your bottle of wine. And my husband's like, take the bottle of wine.
Responsibility of
You're right. You
of our
do.
neighbors, going back to educating the people that live in this town. What is a good neighbor? We haven't defined that yet, but I try to go over, if the parents are there, I go over, hey, my wife and I live here, we don't have our children, we're empty nesters, yeah. I have dogs, my dogs are barking too loud. Come tell me, I want it to be a two-way street here. And I tell their parents, I was a college student once, have fun, but be respectful. And I think it's important for us as locals or counties or we want to call, is to get out there and meet these students, these kids, and introduce yourself. So they may have a name with a face. They won't remember it, but every time, hey guys, how you doing? When the kids moved out this year, they came over and shook my hand, said, hey, thanks, you guys were great neighbors. It starts right from the get-go, is setting the impression that we want them here in town, that they're welcomed. When we send that negative vibe, it's negative, it's gonna be a negative relationship.
And I'm not saying like I'm some mean
No.
person, but I don't want them to give me their, first of all, I'm never gonna remember.
Right.
It's like one more number in my phone, but like, just, I want them to be responsible enough not to have, I don't want it on me. I want you to be able to conduct yourself like an adult. And then these other, I feel like I would rather do this
But
and
not-
have that number than have to call them all individually.
Even though they're adult age-wise, they haven't matured into an adult yet. They're still,
Absolutely. This is part of them becoming an
Right.
adult sometimes, they
Right.
Oh,
gotta-
it's their first, for some of them, it's their first experience at alcohol,
Mhm.
right? I'll give you an example. Our arcade bench street was very busy a few Saturdays ago. There's lots of people in there, families. I walk up to the front door and just fill my checks. And there's a kid, a college kid lying on Main Street on the sidewalk in front of my arcade full of people, licking the sidewalk. So I go grab him and pick him up. I'm like, hey, listen, okay, let's do that somewhere else. Okay, let's not do that in front of my arcade. And he's like, I'm sorry, man, I'm wasted. And I look and he's one of my kids. I'm like, what are you doing? And I walk the kid home. I'm like, go drink some water. What are you doing, man? Like, just, like, but he was wasted. Right? He's a nice kid too. That was the first time I'd seen a real problem with him. But he's on Main Street licking the sidewalk. Okay, because he's wasted. Like, they're not rational when they're, you know what I mean, right? Once you've had 30 beers, like you're all good neighbor documents that you hand them, it's loaded off somewhere else,
Oh, in Orono.
I don't think I know.
The funny thing is, this is like 1 PM.
Yeah.
yeah.
He's licking the sidewalk on Main Street, 1 PM.
That sounds like something else than alcohol.
Think it's, yeah, like, yeah, 10, like Mark Island closes at 10.
Yeah.
9.
They're closing.
But that's why they party at the houses.
Yeah.
And there's just not.
Yeah, the
enough
bars
of
are
a-
this last.
So in terms of the education piece, if we have, it sounded like we were getting close to having like a subcommittee plan, if it's your team, Brian and me, to think about kind of what the communicating, and Laura work with you in terms of what the channels are.
We'll keep Gracie in the loop.
Gracie.
too.
And Gracie, yeah, of course. We'll come back with some education drafts for next week in terms of, you know, what those communications could look
Info
like.
packet or something.
Info packet, one for like a handout, the landlord, the handout for landlords to potentially provide. And ultimately, you know, we could think about, you know, voluntary to begin with, and then we'll have a broader discussion about, is this something we want to have be a requirement as part of our rental registration, like the lead paint pieces for the state. So if we have that, a draft of that for next week. And then I'd also invite people to, before we get into the ordinance changes, to think about and send Rob and I your thoughts on what a good neighbor framework is for people. You know, what is it we want to be able to articulate to people in terms of what it means to be a good neighbor? If it's not, you know, I've said before, you know, no mass gatherings after 10 p.m. Maybe that might be too broad because, you know, Tammy Carter in my house is gonna have 12 kids sleeping in tents at my neighborhood, 12 kids sleeping in tents this weekend. And I don't wanna, you know, I don't wanna label that a mass gathering just because they're staying overnight in tents out back, you know. So we're gonna think about, like, is it the Tucson ordinance that Brian has shared with us, or some of us, has the unruly gathering piece, and we've got the unruly disorderly event piece in our ordinance already. But if people could think through and get Rob and I some thoughts on what they'd like to see, how we define what a good neighbor is. Does that make sense?
You want to send it to you via email?
Yeah, send it by email, copy everybody if you choose to. I mean, can we copy everybody? We can, right? Or is it, it's not like the council.
So, yeah, but yeah, the early work's gotta be viewed by the community, so whatever you do compile, you can email each other, but you gotta bring it all together and have it here, so if
Yeah.
somebody asks for it, they can see it.
Okay, so,
Brian, did you resend it to something? Can you
Yeah.
resend it?
yeah, but send it in, send it in so we have something to look at, and then we can. I'd really like to be able to, I think it'd be really helpful to end next week's meeting with a sense from this group, a consensus from this group, what a good neighbor expectations would be, and then we can dive into the ordinance changes and the levers that we have in the town to achieve those. Does that make sense? Okay.
In the renter's bill of rights by Gracie, like, would be included in that, right?
Yeah, well, that would be part of the communication document, and then we'll,
Yeah.
you know, we'll make the communication document fit. It's kind of a three-prong approach,
Yeah.
right? We'll have a communication materials and channels that we'll consider using. That could be everything from the stuff in the businesses to the signages in the neighborhoods to the things we hand out in town offices or ask landlords to hand out. And then work with the school to distribute. So the communication piece, we gotta come together and decide what a good neighbor piece, what is our good neighbor expectations, and get a consensus on that. And then we gotta dive into the details about how do we enforce that? Are what kind of fines are we talking about? What kind of those kinds of elements where we kind of make it real, make it stick. So it's not just a flyer, you know, what else beyond just, I like a good flyer as much as the next person, but, what makes it real for people?
Well, I like what Lori was raising before, just as many different types of engagement as possible, because you can never guarantee that somebody's gonna see one or two or even three of them.
Yeah. Carrot, and you know, no one wants to evict anybody, no one wants to, you know, send the police after people. What, we gotta make it clear what it is we're trying to create in terms of an expectation, just like a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. It is no clearer than that. But even with that, you know, it's 25 miles an hour, you know, Dan's not gonna give you a ticket if you're going 34.
It's noise though. I mean,
Hold you to that.
I think noise is so hard for people to get engaged themselves. I know when I was in college, we had, I think, pretty raucous parties. But we're also music students and we know how to soundproof a house. Which honestly, I mean, I went to a lot of parties, never got complaints, police never came.
That's our
Well, we
reaction.
get more complaints when it starts getting warmer.
Because people are outside.
Yeah,
And they open their
Yeah.
windows.
Windows open.
Everybody we open our windows, they open their windows.
that's a good point.
When we do come up with this, utilize the tools we have, the town office website, the observer that you mentioned earlier, getting this message out there. Facebook. Would you email, I don't know,
We'll get an engagement plan through Cody. That was part of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's, yep, that's.
all different tools and, you know, where the students are, you know, they're on
Yeah.
the TikTok thing and they've
Yeah.
got some other app they use to, you know, they're using.
Everybody's picturing this old place doing a
Mhm.
TikTok video.
Well, I think, you know,
Don't tempt him.
You
Do not
geofence
tempt
your
him.
neighborhood, so you get a notification on your phone to be a good neighbor as soon as you enter the Webster neighborhood.
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
and we should do that.
Yeah.
Is there any thought after we've completed all this, maybe meeting once or twice a year, just to see, hey, how are things over on Webster side or
Yeah.
something like that? Like, are we seeing a difference? Because sometimes we don't see this information. It would be nice to, oh yeah, it is making a difference over at the hockey house. It's not as bad or,
That's the assessment and
yeah,
evaluation.
like come back and,
Yeah.
Leo said last time, what's working, what's not working? We go back and say, oh, this didn't work, let's try this.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to meet towards the middle to end of the semester, see how it went, and then, you know, and we're gonna do like a Orono Stops annual report, you know, it's gonna come to council and we're gonna get some feedback on what's not and what our next opportunities are, and I think we should do this. Because there's nothing that frustrates people more and turns people off more than showing up, spending some energy on something and then it's nothing happened.
That's why when you were saying how those fines were levied in October and May or whenever it was, like, I didn't know. And like, I don't know about any of those fines that may have happened in the past 23 years. But, you know, just like what you guys are saying, to have that assessment, to know that something happened and then we're moving forward, I do think that that would be really beneficial.
Like this disorderly property, when someone gets on the naughty list, right? I mean, it is public information, isn't it, in terms of.
You have to go look for
Civil-
somewhere.
So I mean, that's the kind of thing that we should probably expect as a community, that if, you know, we get some feedback in terms of how these things were managed. And it creates, you know, they used to put, when I, you know, in town, I grew up in rural Western Maine, and if you bounced a check at the market basket, they put it right under the glass up front in terms of, and I think, you know, we're talking about putting stickers on the sides of houses, but, which I think is, I'm open to that too, and I think that, but that kind of scrutiny is a reminder that this is, so when we talk about properties that we had a problem with.
It's not secretive.
Yeah.
It's out there.
I guess we're at 10:02, we got a half an hour left. Gracie, do you have anything for us? I want to make sure, I know it's hard sometimes electronically to.
Think so at the moment now.
What's that?
At the moment, I don't think I have anything.
You're coming through loud and clear, so when you do, just let us know. In terms of, Rob, I don't know, the ordinance change, you gotta
I
go?
have to
Yeah.
go. I'm gonna try and call in on Zoom though.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Feel like, on the ordinance change issue, we have some I know, like, we've got some quick, easy things that, well, maybe not easy, but some quicker things we can do, like on fines and things like that. How do we want to bring that work forward in terms of discussions? I mean, it's a complicated.
There's several different buckets of ordinances, I guess, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's the noise ordinances, there's the fines piece. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, are there easily distinguishable sections of ordinance that you think we could tackle one at a time from staff's perspective?
I think one of the conversations that we actually had after this that would be important, even if it's just for this flyer, is we talk about some of our ordinances. I think that we need to not mix them. The noise ordinance is a different ordinance than the disorderly property ordinance. And I've even been guilty of it. I mentioned it to them. I've been guilty of calling the noise ordinance the disorderly property ordinance. So I think the disorderly property ordinance is what's more applicable to these type of instances that we're talking about. The noise ordinance would be more applicable to the construction works, the permitted things, you know, a business, you know, Orono Brewing Company or OHOP or something like that has an event because of their license and they're violating the noise of that. That would be the decimal reader noise ordinance section of the ordinance. These parties and mass gatherings fall much under the, or don't much more fall under the disorderly property side. So it's not necessarily about the decimals, it's about capacity and disturbance.
And we talked about this, because we're meeting just to kind of keep the dialogue for the staff, so we can make sure we get it all together correctly for everyone. It's the two pieces. One, there's gonna be problems enforcing any of these. It's not as, I mean, whatever you do here, there's going to be that case scenario we can't foresee. But the one that's really got confused the most is that a disorderly property is noisy. They do not have to have violated the noise ordinance unless we're citing them for violating the noise ordinance. We can cite them for a disorderly property for being noisy. That doesn't mean they violated, and that's one of those ones that I think as a communication with the public, I think that's been maybe lost, and this process has really, with fresh eyes, has really got a chance with, Mitch and I both being new to our roles and kind of, and then being able to communicate with the police department, saying, this is what we're hearing. It's not the noise ordinance, it's disorderly properties. I think the other, and just to finish off, is the other two things that we saw within the disorderly property. Yes, fines, of course. Two, it needs to reference that illegal parking is a violation of is one of the criteria of a disorderly property. Because that's what it says right in there, and it's a pretty good, I mean, everything can be challenged, and this is one of the ones that we've talked about as a team. Just because we cite them for a civil violation of the disorderly property, they could fight us, that's great. But with the right landlords, fight all you want, sooner or later, whether you pay the fine or not.
The fight itself,
the issue will be addressed.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we're coming, and again, and that's our responsibility as the town to deal with it, we don't mind, and as long as the council understands that's what's gonna happen. If we suddenly saw a huge influx of these, we might have some problems, I mean, but I don't think this isn't like we're gonna start seeking out disorderly properties, we're just trying to get the ones that are right here. And we all know it, they're right there in your face, so I think those are the two pieces, you want something easy, one, parking, illegal street parking is prima facie evidence of a disorderly property, which allows an officer to then stop and take a look at it, and two, these fines are inconsistent with what even the landlords that are enforcing this are doing. And I mean, yes, you gotta keep it to a reasonable level, but I mean, if you're on a third violation and there's more than 50 people, I don't think $400 is a really good fine level. And that's what would take. A second violation would be $400 and it would be over 50 people. I think you can greatly increase these. Huh?
20 people right now.
Oh, yeah, or over 20 people, yeah.
Who's the fine levied on?
Fines levied on, so the way our ordinances are worded, it's levied to the property owner, and if they use a property management company, we do go through, or they're property management companies, we work through those two. It's kind of one and the same. If an owner tells us they're using a property management, we use them. So that's where it goes. It's the responsibility of the landlord to fine their tenants, and that's one of those ones that we'd like to educate landlords more, saying, if you find you should probably put the clauses a few of you I know have that say we can pass these fines right directly on to you as our tenants.
Does the attorney say that that's enforceable? It's never worked well holding the liquor companies responsible for drunk drivers.
Correct.
It's never worked on the gun companies responsible for people shooting.
Ultimately, what we want to do is give you enough information on the town side that you've got enough evidence to evict. So is it to be completely enforceable? Once you evict, you can go through a long process, but how many of those will you go through before the word spreads? Yeah, don't rent there. They're gonna evict you.
They'll be out of school before the evictions get.
Yeah.
I'm not, cause I've never tried an eviction that way. I've done evictions for non-payment and things like that. And that can take 2 to 3 months if you hit every single date. The legislature in Maine has worked really hard to protect the tenants.
Yep.
And they hate the landlords. And I understand it's the same reason we think all used car salesmen are crooks, because
we could
there
do
are some crooks in the landlord business and they're giving us all a bad name.
Yeah, but Lori will get it to them before you will, right? I mean, if a student, I always thought that's kind of one of the interesting things about being a.
Well, that's what I said about the former property, but I wouldn't rent to that same group another year.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, like, get
But I
rid of
mean,
one
you
on
can
back.
come out of the residence
That
halls
makes sense.
and say you can't come back to live in the residence halls anymore. We basically kick them to you. And we can still hold them responsible, even off campus.
We'll zip that one to the attorneys on can we do, and maybe if our rental, this goes back to the next one. If the rental registration can require the landlord to update us of your tenants, then we might be able to find a way that we could directly find the tenant that's on register with us. So let me see if I can work that, and that way the fine would go directly to.
So who are you gonna find if Dennis has a wild party at his house? Who gets fined then?
The property owner. Your house you own, we would find the property.
He's probably got an LLC.
He's
He's
gonna-
gonna-
We would find the property owner. That's the only, that's kind of where, if you want the perfect scenario, just tell us to find the property owners.
I understand why you do it, because we're the only ones you can collect from.
Yeah,
The kid's going back to New Jersey, Connecticut, you've lost any option beginning.
But from my perspective, then, I think for the issue the town's dealing with, that can solve the problem. Because we really aren't dealing with a class that has a overall problem. It's individuals. This isn't like students are the only ones causing us issues. I mean, one of the 2 assaults last year was a non-resident. It had nothing to do with being a college student at all. It was just, but
they got attracted to an event that was held in one of our
yeah,
residential neighborhoods.
so I mean, I think for the most part is if we can treat the symptom, we will take care of the root problem.
yeah. So you know me, I'm very supportive of fines. I'm very supportive of you increasing your fines, okay? But you also gotta think about what's right. I almost got run over in your sidewalk. Let's say he was there and saw it. Is it right for him to fine you? It's your sidewalk. Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You didn't do anything. You just have a sidewalk. It's not your fault. You have a wonderfully built, beautiful crosswalk. And it's all marked and everything is proper. Why should you pay the fine?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't the driver pay the fine? Well, when I get fined for what some dummy who rents from me does.
I think more
Well, it
analogous
feels
to
like,
this is
you
when
know.
a private citizen is, say, renting one of the town's spaces versus a sidewalk that's publicly available.
Yeah.
Then there are different sort of layers of liability.
Sure, but I mean, just from my perspective, why am I paying
Yeah.
for what someone else did that's against?
Yeah,
the
but then
rules?
like with you and Dennis,
Right.
I mean, I feel like the 2 of you are here because you're part of the community and I think frankly, your reputation's worth probably, it feels like maybe your reputation's worth more to you than whatever the fine is gonna be.
Yeah, agreed, yeah.
And I like that about the 2 of you, a lot. What about someone who maybe doesn't have that same affinity to Orono? And it just, this is a cash, this is a passive, somewhat, they try to make it as passive an investment as they can. And, they live 2 towns or 2 states away and can't hear, so how do you get to them and make it matter to them? Or maybe get them out of the business of doing business in Orono if they're just not gonna be the kind of responsive landlord that the 2 of you are.
I think you make a great point, and we talked about that a little bit last time, right? And one of the things I considered was 50-50,
Yeah.
right? Because not all landlords care. Them paying half the fine is good because it gets their attention, right? Now, you already have our attention, but someone,
Right.
like you said, describing someone like that, it's gonna get their attention. But the challenge is if you find a landlord, and I get, it's what you said, that's the person that can find, right? But we can help them find, right? They send, police contacts us and says, hey, who are your tenants? I can give them that info in 5 minutes, right? We'll tell them on the phone, right? PD has our numbers from the rental registration. We give them our cell phone numbers down. So if we pay 100% of the fines, right? One of the ways that we can change behavior is with fines, okay? But oftentimes, one of the ways that behavior gets changed is when mom and dad get involved. And mom and dad get involved when the kids get in trouble. If the big bad landlord charges them $500, sometimes mom and dad don't find out. Sometimes mom and dad think that greedy jerk is trying to make money. When the kids get a $250 fine from PD and they get a $250 fine from the landlord who says, hi, I got this fine, now you're gonna pay me. That gets attention a lot better. Now the parents are involved, the kids are in trouble. The parents are given, hopefully, conversations about, hey, listen, I'm paying for you to go get an education. Okay, don't get kicked out of school. Now, landlord fine does not get attention like a PD fine would help us get their attention. If I need to collect a fine and they're not gonna pay, my one and only, well, I have 2 ways to do it, right? One takes up to a year. I could deduct it from their deposit. It's not gonna change behavior today.
Right.
Because it happens 3, 4, 6, 12 months in advance. The second way would be for me to sue them in court, which I've done. Which, as Dennis says, takes 8 to 12 weeks, right, depending on court schedule, stuff like that. Okay,
You're
so
lucky.
if you're right, if you're like, yeah, 12 weeks, I think.
You can't
briefly,
do it that fast.
But the point is, if we're trying to change their behavior relatively quickly, none of those remedies that I have are quick. they're all things where the problem could continue for months and residents get frustrated. PD showing up, hey, that's actually landlord. I want to talk to these 5 people.
So I,
These 5 people live here.
Yeah.
Each of you is getting cited and then I get cited too, because I agree landlord's paying half gets their attention. You know what I mean? Something like that, I think is have more teeth and you'll get more immediate change to behavior, you know?
for me, that was incredibly persuasive, what you just walked us through.
Yeah.
In terms of the communication strategy. And I don't know, Clint, if our town attorney, we're gonna use Roger on some of this stuff.
I'm gonna take it through, yeah, probably, probably.
Does it make sense to ask him to join us at one of these, or you have?
Yeah, well, I can give him some of the information to outline first, maybe we should probably spend some time nailing down what it is we wanna ask.
Let's do this.
Because if we go on a sidebar with the attorney present,
Let's do the.
it's not as cheap.
Yeah, let's do, I agree. You're like, the lady here is talking about how we need to cross the bridge.
Exactly.
Does it make sense for us to, if we do the disorderly, in terms of, the timeline piece? Does it make sense if we do the disorderly property, kind of dive deep into that one in our next week's conversation? Kind of map out what we want to have, and then,
Homework to review it, I assume,
What's that?
is the homework to review it.
yeah, review it, kind of get into it, and then if there's sidebar conversations that happen on the fine piece and how to split it up, I think that would be.
And we can have a legal opinion on some of the tougher things you've just bulleted to see what Roger says just in advance and saying, yeah, he's looked at it and you could do this, you could do that. Won't be all inclusive, but we'll kind of hit some of
But if
those.
we had a discussion about what the just scope of the fines need to be to kind of be more attention getting,
Yep.
then how to, if there's an opportunity to split them up, I would, yeah, I absolutely agree with Matt. I'm hearing from, there's no offense, I mean, you guys get, people think that, you see it on the Black Bear Parent Facebook page.
Oh, 9% they
Yeah.
try and make money and no, we're trying to stop behavior, right?
Yeah.
Like, the other thing too to remember is, because of the rental registration, PD has access to our cell phone numbers, right?
Yeah.
Now, if rental registration becomes public record, my cell phone number is not gonna be in the rental registration anymore. My office number is gonna be, so keep that
Right.
in mind. But PD has access to our cell phone numbers, and I will bet you most people like Dennis and I, we have, of course, we have our laptops and stuff, but we have printed records of all of our tenants.
Yeah.
And mine is in every single vehicle that I drive. You know why? Because I know I may need it really fast.
Yeah.
About something, right? And so PD calls me, I can just literally open up, yep, that's Jimmy, that's Timmy, that's Sally.
Yeah.
And now PD on the spot knows who to cite, you know what I mean?
I almost think too, like, we talked a little bit about and obviously like a bigger conversation about the rental registration piece and making it publicly available. I almost think, and I'm looking at you when I'm saying this, I'd rather just have the 911 be the public number that people need to call. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's fine. Like I said, maybe I need to be
Yeah.
re-educated,
Yeah.
and some of us that are wary of.
And the
calling.
non-emergency number, and then the report of concern, the good neighbor concern, form on that you put, like, so a couple weeks ago, I put on there that people were putting these painting signs all over town, these little commercial billboards, and and it got addressed, and so those are the places we send people when they've got like cars, garbage or cars and stuff like that. But the 911, it's gotta be, it doesn't really matter to me that who the name of the landlord is at 1 a.m. or whenever. I mean, I'd rather just have you call the right number for the town to take care of it.
I'll just say one thing.
Sure.
I like your point about the fines because I do think something needs to happen in real time, right? That
Yeah, yeah,
immediacy,
for sure.
if you get, I think this is how it works. I haven't been, but if you get stopped speeding, you get a fine. It's not like we're gonna hit you back in 4 months. So that's really good. Is there a second tier we could do in terms of fines that is landlord specific for repeat offending houses?
Sure.
Like the hockey house, and every couple of years, there is actually a revolving hockey house in Webster, right? I mean, it might be here, it might be there, but for a landlord or a group.
Wouldn't that be
That
citing them
doesn't-
for furnishing though? I mean, isn't that a level up? Under what circumstances would you cite them for furnishing a place for minors to consume?
Landlord, cite a landlord?
No, the residents but that would be.
Well, what I mean though is we're talking about fines, whether they're split or whatever between landlords and the students, but it might need that, like, there's a really big fine And that gets triggered when we've got multiple years of a house, and it's triggered on the property owner, because if nothing else is working and they aren't getting another company, and there are a number of calls, that I feel like we might need a bigger.
A big beautiful fine, is that what they're calling it in Washington, or is that not?
Please don't put that person roads and not. Yeah, but
It's a little funny.
just something that could be a
Yeah.
significant deterrent. And I think of it more of as a deterrent than actually having to
Yeah.
trigger it. But you
Yeah.
know, like, you know, you don't get your act together in 1 or 2 calendar years, you're facing X.
Let's dig into options on that one. I can get you more.
Doesn't the
Listen, that
disorderly
sounds
have
super
that?
fair to me.
It isn't like maybe this, I think I heard last time that this house on North Main is into that phase of you
The step
can't,
up
nothing
crazy.
can happen in, you know, the next 6 months, 3, 6, yeah,
But
yeah.
then what if something did? What would the consequence be? That's what I don't know.
Find out,
In that ordinance.
And find the
Double
double
the
fine would
doubling.
then
Find out.
be.
so it'd be $800, or 400 to be $800.
So for a significant landlord, is that enough of a deterrent? I guess I'm asking you guys, because I would say operating at a certain level where you're bringing in, you know, if you're a landlord, maybe like the
What's a
person who
five
owns this, you know,
outside?
if you're bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in rent.
I would
Would
move to that
800
stage, I would
dollars
not have
here?
renewed the lease. I
Right.
can't believe they did that.
Yeah.
Right, but if,
I don't get it.
Again, I don't wanna pick on the company, it's a brand new management company.
right,
To the area.
They found out when we cited them the second time that this was a repeat offense of the property. That's when they found out they'd already renewed the lease.
Not
This
too
wasn't
far.
like, oh, we're well aware, you're paying.
So,
Yeah.
They then, and they're like, uh-oh,
it's,
what are we gonna do?
but it starts because we didn't call 911 in the beginning. You know, we didn't educate people in the beginning. We didn't call 911 to get people on the list.
Yeah.
And then we didn't follow, you know what I mean? It's just that, it's gotta start with, and I don't want it to be 3 events into the year before someone gets any kind of trouble, you know? But I think that is the challenge, is once the town engages at that level, where you're hearing from the town manager and the police chief, and that's significant, but we don't get people there fast enough because we're not calling, and we're
So you initiate that third step, what period of time do you figure would be before the house is empty of tenants? It's not gonna happen in a week, not gonna happen in a month,
Right.
probably won't happen in the school year. So I'm just wondering, is that accomplishing anything?
it does when, you know, if a disorderly property gets a sticker on it and it's something watched, the neighborhood are calling, and I mean, you get less, I would assume we get less and less. We get more and more attuned to what's going on in that property, and I assume that our police department looks at it, you know, more and more closely. And then there are more and more things you can do. Oh, now you're showing up and you're like, how many people here are minors who have a beer in their hand? You know, and those are all felonies, and then you're calling Lori because there's code of conduct issues going on. And they
Call parents.
And they call parents, or they send people home, or whatever it is they do, they can't tell us, but we have some comfort in that they're gonna pursue those types of.
Yeah, I'm not looking for overnight. I mean, I'm looking for like year to year. I mean, we've been there
I
23
think
years.
she's on to something. And I shouldn't think that, 'cause I'm a landlord, it's bad for me, so, but I do think she's on to something, I'll tell you what. So, because she covered the timeline in her statement, right? She wasn't said, because, you know, I think we've made it clear, we have legal remedies, civil remedies through the courts, and they take months, and listen, courts are busy. Look, I got picked for 2 juries this month. Courts are busy, right? I get it, 6 months. I'm not criticizing courts, but our remedies take months. And if somebody doesn't cross a line to the point where we can evict them, it could take a year to get somebody out. I agree with Dennis. Somebody's a problem, I'm not gonna rent to them again. I'm done. They're on the blacklist, right? But she didn't say weeks or months. She said, you know, hey, if it's like this for a year or 2 years. So I think she covered that in her point. And now listen, when we're talking about rich landlords, listen, I wanna be clear, I'm wearing flip-flops and I drive a used truck with dings in it. So we're not talking about me, we're talking about somebody else. But the point is, if a landlord is running that property in a way that's like that for 2 years in a row, shame on them, right? In the beginning, it's shame on the tenant, because listen, it's not my fault. Some grown-ups do stupid stuff. I didn't do it. But if I continue the business relationship with that tenant, knowing that they're causing a giant mess, that is my fault suddenly. And so I think there's a number of remedies you could find. And I see your point, right? If, maybe you're not talking about Des and I, but some of these big firms out in New York that own the big complexes or part owners, like a $2,500 fine, it's a rounding error. Right, to me, you got my attention,
Yeah.
sure, but to them, maybe you're right, it's a rounding error, but there's other things you could do, and again, listen, I shouldn't suggest this, I probably wish I hadn't. There's things you could do, like, if it's extreme, and you've gone through a very long process with a landlord, you could suspend their ability to rent that unit next year by not allowing it to be resident.
I gotta find out. I don't know if we can do that.
Well, I'm just throwing stuff at the wall.
I think it's in the ordinance.
Lose your
Do
license.
it.
Right, whether it hold legal scrutiny, right? But the point is that I think there's certainly things that, if there's long-term problems with some of the same owners, some of the same landlords, and they just clearly don't care, and all the fines and fees aren't working, I'm supportive of a bigger step, as long as it's legal and lawful, will hold scrutiny in the courts, right, of course, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because really, it shouldn't be a party house 2 years in a row, and if it is, the landlord's not doing a good job.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that highlights the importance of starting the clock running.
Yeah,
You know, that first
And
party call.
I think a
911.
lot of this is
Gotta be in
addressed
the record.
in the ordinance. The question is, are the fines big enough, which I think we've already addressed that they're not.
No.
And so it could be just additions to this or what's already there being supplemented by fines.
Yeah.
That are appropriate and get to the point, but they do run with the property. It's not like, as we said, as it carries over the next year, it would be there for the property.
I think it is important everyone does go through and understand this ordinance, because this thing was done. Again, this is nothing new, obviously, in this town, right? And it was done, I think 16, 18 years ago, I think is when they did.
Which one?
Rental registration, I think is when rental registration came on. Disorderly property might have been after that, actually. But there was the same group, different players, everyone sat around, the parties were worse. We'd hear from, the chief, like, 200-person party on Mill, we chased it over to Pine, so it was worse when this was done, and so it's important that we do understand what's in here, and probably a lot of this stuff already is in here, and if we can come up with some, nothing. Again, this is sort of nothing new going on here, but if there's a tweak or increased fine and stuff like that, then
Catch it earlier and pursue it harder.
and in communicating out what
Yeah.
it is, like.
Yeah.
And I like the timeline, and also if even way down, even if it's 3, 4, 5 years later, if there is somewhere out there that someone could lose their license and no longer rent in our neighborhood, I think that would go a long way to people actually making that initial call, because I think that's basically that's what everybody gets upset about, is that it's the same people, the people that you can't get in touch with, it's that same property owner that's never around, and we have to deal with the messes that are across the street.
So we're coming up on 10:30, and I think we've kind of covered a lot of the agenda without working our way through the agenda, necessarily specifically, but we're a broad thinking group, so we kind of move around a little bit. In terms of the homework for next items, could we just articulate that again? Does that make sense for people? So we're gonna have kind of a communication. Clint, Brian, Dan, Lori, and Gracie and I are gonna kind of convene on communication topics and come back with a draft for us to discuss next week. We're gonna ask everybody if you've got items that you want to see in a kind of how we define what a good neighbor is, what it is to be a good neighbor in one of those residential neighborhoods. If you have ideas, you can send those to Rob and I, and we'll bring them back, and I see them being several like one sentence things or phrase things that we end up kind of working on together and sort of kind of coming up with a draft of what that is. And then we're also going to do, everyone's homework is to look at the disorderly property ordinance, and we can share around a link to make sure you're looking at the right one, but that'll be the one we take on first, and I really appreciate. And we're gonna think about it in terms of, staff's gonna think about some of these items and maybe talk with our attorney about, there's the end of the line fine or action for, if there's a property owner who just is not a good partner in this work. And we're gonna think about how do we share, the fine with a landlord and a tenant directly in terms of being a behavior correction opportunity, so.
And that's your goal, right? Is quick change of behavior, not months, not years, quick change of behavior.
Ideally, we get to them before they even have something and kind of understand what the expectations are. If they run afoul of the expectations, we're helping them, education and enrichment community, right? So helping them get better fast. Anybody have anything else? This is good work. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everyone.
Rob, or